There are things that we see very early on that we know are going to rumble on in the background and will explode. As I said, when I read up about bravery being detected, it was just like, you are kidding me. And I think they reached a certain point and there's some more to be done. And it's interpretation of bravery rather than, oh, I know just how brave you are. Clearly that's impossible. But some of the facial recognition stuff that's being done, so that you can tell through somebody's demeanour how up they are to compete. And do they then need to go and see the sports psych, or actually do they need maybe to come on to a match later? Or what can the backroom team do to make them even more competition ready?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Drive Phase podcast from Coordinate Sport. This is your show about sports founders, leaders, and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Today, really excited to bring you a conversation between myself and Rebecca Hopkins, the founder of the STA Group. Wide-ranging conversations around her journey into sports tech and what it's like leading and growing, launching the Sports Tech Awards over the last decade, and how that's grown and where it's going to go to. We also dive into kind of all those tech trends, sports tech trends, the things that she's seen come through and been successful. As always, touch on her earlier career and those highlights, one of which being the launch of the Sports Industry Awards, which is another kind of mainstay staple in the sector. So really great to hear about that. So anyone interested in how to find a kind of a gap in the market, a niche that you can really launch something into and grow into, it'd be great for you to listen to. As always, we want to hear your comments and feedback. So leave us some comments on the video or in your podcast app. But yeah, enjoy the show. Okay, so I'm really delighted to have Rebecca Hopkins join me today. She is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of the STA Group. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's really good. And thank you for bearing with us in terms of getting things scheduled. I know we kind of went back and forth a few times, a couple of false starts there. But yeah, really.
Busy people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, really excited to talk to you and talk about the awards primarily, and also all things kind of tech and sport, which would be great. But as we normally do on the show, kind of get to know you a little bit better and let our listeners understand your journey a bit more. So we normally start back at kind of school and sport in school. So what would be your kind of memories of childhood growing up in school and kind of first memories of sport?
Well, gosh, it probably started, I was lucky, it started for me probably before school. My father was a very good rugby player and cricketer, so there was always balls and bats, and I had a big brother, and he either used to put me in goal or put me in wicket or make me bowl at him. So by the time I got to school, yes, sport was just something that you did. I wasn't any great shakes at sport. I was in quite a few of the teams, but I was never in danger of picking up international silverware. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a bit of a lifestyle in your family then, in terms of sport, having a pretty prioritised.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I always think that people who are not that big into exercise, whether it's sports or whether it's just movement, probably are the people who haven't done it that much. Because for me, sport is and always has been central to good health, mental health, and at the moment I'm sporting a cracked wrist, and being off games is killing me. So.
Imagine. So going through school and kind of moving on with your career into like academics, etc. Were you always looking at a career in, like, we're talking about sport now, specifically sports technology? Was there a spark in you there to think I'd like to work in sport at some stage, or was it kind of something you found yourself in?
I didn't even know it was something that you could do, because I've now been working in sport. My first break in sport was in 1999, and I got into it completely by accident. And if somebody had told me when I was at school I could have got a career in sport, it was probably would have looked at them a bit side-eye. But actually, when I first started in sport in '99, it was most of the people in positions of influence in sport were largely former sports people or ex-military, or lawyers. Those seem to be the kind of holy trinity of people who ran sport back then.
What was that first opportunity that you felt that you had back in '99? Your first kind of.
Oh, well, I'd come from a media background, and I'd hit a bit of a glass ceiling and thought, you know what, I'm just going to try freelancing for a while, and said to an interim agency, just get me something, because if ever you decide to freelance, the first job's always the hardest. So I said, get me something somewhere, doing anything in marketing, because I was lucky I could turn my hand to most things. And they said, well, BT needs an internal comms manager up in Birmingham on a short-term basis. Would you consider that? The interview's at 5:30 on a Friday night, and at the time I lived in southwest London, and it was like, okay.
I say that's not a good. That's not only a good sign, right? The 5:30 on a Friday interview might not be good. Don't always look like a good sign. Yeah.
Well, and plus the fact driving up and back to Birmingham from Wandsworth isn't the most fun I've had. But I thought, well, I said, get me anything. I got the gig, and it wasn't a sport gig initially, but because I kept disappearing off to rugby games at the weekend, they kind of sidled up to me and said, you seem to know quite a lot about rugby. Thinking, I think I do. And they said, well, we're sponsoring the World Cup. We need somebody to slot into that sponsorship team. Is that something you might be interested in doing? And it was, is the Pope Catholic?
Yeah.
And they gave me kind of a 2-month shot at it. And I ended up staying there for 2 years, and I worked with some of the most wonderful people I think I've ever worked with in my career. I've been lucky. I've got a great team around me now as well. But that particular group of people at that time in my life, I was just so lucky to work with them. And we're still in touch, and we've got a reunion happening next month. All of us are getting together. How long ago is '99? So nearly 25 years later, we're all getting together for a beer. So it really set me up on my career now. I owe them everything.
Yeah, and that first gig, obviously, so you're working on the sponsorships team for the Rugby World Cup. What did that? I guess now, looking at what that kind of role would look like nowadays versus then, I'm really curious in terms of what that looked like. Is that a lot of negotiation and kind of bringing the partners on board, or was it more the kind of creative side?
No, well, because it was BT were the sponsors, right, of the rights, it was all more about engaging BT's internal community on it, because at that time BT had something like 135,000 employees, and the passion in the company was to really encourage recognition and reward for them, as well as create initiatives that made the brand stand out amongst the different sponsors. Because back in those days, the family of sponsors that used to be on a major sporting event was, quite some roll call. So standing out amongst all those, that was part of my challenge. So aged not that old, I had the joy of dealing and managing with all the player ambassadors from around the world that we had on board. So I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. But I'm only flesh and blood. So it was a hell of a gig. But that actually informed the next thing I did, which was because BT got to the point and they said, we can't keep you on as a freelancer. And we can't employ you because we're making redundancies. But if you set up your own agency, we'll keep using you. And at that point, which was a great head start to have, setting up a business. And at that point, I realised that everything that was happening in British sport was all about the tracksuits, not the suits. Nobody was celebrating the business endeavours of the industry. And so seeing that and having such a strong media background made me think, well, actually, there's a huge gap in the market here. Why don't we do a sport industry award that celebrates the business side of sports? And so I set up the Sport Industry Awards, and doing that and selling them to Benchmark gave me the money that I needed to underwrite ENS, which was my PR agency.
Just a couple of bits on there to unpack. Did you before BT had said that to you? Did you ever have a feeling of wanting to start your own agency, or was it just kind of like, well, yeah, that makes sense because of that? Is that always going to be the end game, like doing this and I'll get my own business?
I always knew I was a bit unemployable.
Yeah, a bit like me.
Yeah, I've always been really lucky in that when I was employed by somebody else, I'd always kind of come up with different things and had always had managers who could see that entrepreneurial spark in me and who encouraged it. Because I started off life back in the day at News International, and at the grand old age of 21 announced that we should be running a particular sort of conference, and saying, when I look back at it, it was so audacious. I'm almost embarrassed to share this. But we should be doing this. I was really lucky that the senior people in the business said, "Give it your best, kid." And so I set up something, and they were really supportive of me. And it then, after I left, I think what I set up ran for about 5 or 6 more years. I think it made them quite a bit of money, but I was just really lucky in the people, everybody I've worked with has always seen something in me and just said, look, you want to do it, you're prepared to work that hard and bring it to fruition, go for it. And so that's something that I've always tried to carry through.
The Sports Industry Awards are obviously now like hugely recognised and kind of a cornerstone of the industry and something everyone looks at. At the time when you created that, was it kind of so foreign that people were kind of thinking not a great idea, or were you obviously had passion about it and you'd seen that gap? Well, I'm just interested in the early stages, like that's kind of startup story for that specific.
Well, it was one of those things that you always know when you've hit on a good idea, because about a dozen people will tell you, yeah, I thought of doing that. And just went for it, really. And I think year one, there were 800 people at the Hilton in London. So it got pretty big immediately.
I was going to say, that's pretty,
and of course,
first year. That's pretty good.
Well, the landscape back then, because that was 2001, 2002. Back then, really, the only big sporting events that used to happen outside Sports Personality of the Year or those types of things were testimonial events for sports people. When sports people were amateur.
So everyone was looking for an excuse to get together then, looking for an excuse for a party or something, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the idea, if you've worked really hard on creating a great campaign or sponsorship or all those kind of things, nobody was recognising it, and we all like to have pats on the back. And I think that was the thing. It was suddenly like, great, somebody is at last looking at because the suits as well. Back then I used to say sports split into 2 sectors. It was suits and tracksuits. These days I say it's suits, tracksuits and lab coats. And it's always nice to have that third party endorsement of your work and just have that official recognition. And those of us who work in sport always value a bit of silverware. And so I just think it was one of those classic things, absolutely the right thing at the right time, done in the right way. And hats off to the guys at Benchmark. The way they've taken it onwards and upwards, good on them.
Yeah, I guess always interested in deal making and things like that. So how did that come about? So you did sell the awards. Was that pretty early on? Was it kind of, this is going to be bigger than I want to have to manage, and kind of let me get someone into who's going to kind of scale it?
No, it was pretty much because I'd worked closely with Nick to bring it to that point, and it was kind of the day after the deal was done. And I was really keen to set up a PR agency doing PR the way I wanted to do it. So it was nice to have the funds to then go on and do PR. But it was then really interesting. What I learned from doing the awards, or those awards, I was able to apply then when we set up the Sports Technology Awards, because that was 11 years ago now as well.
And again, probably similar to, I'm going to get into that, but probably similar kind of landscape in terms of people not getting recognised for sports technology endeavours or apps or things that they're creating.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly the same. Because and yeah, it's amazing how necessity can be the mother of invention. Because we were a boutique sports PR, and we were doing some really interesting work with some great clients. I mean, we really punched above our weight. But when in 2012 we got the Olympics, that was announced in what, 2007? Yeah, God. I mean, I've obviously been around such a long time, James. The decades merge. But when we got that, suddenly everybody in PR started saying about, well, we've got sports expertise, or we've got a sports division. And for boutiques to compete with that became really tough. And we were okay, but I just had the feeling that, for us to be able to stand out was going to be super tough. And we needed to find that angle that made us unique in the landscape. And it suddenly struck me, well, sports technology is the single biggest force shaping the industry. Why is nobody doing anything to get its arms around that? And originally, the awards were going to be the tail on the dog of the PR agency. And again, those awards went from 0 to 100 miles an hour in a second and a half. We launched them and we had entries from around the world. Some of the biggest sporting brands were in, and it really was a side hustle. And so after 2 cycles of the awards, we realised that if we didn't get our arms around it and treat it seriously, somebody was going to come along and steal our lunch. And actually, this was a really interesting space, and it was more of a dog, with the PR agency being the tail on it. So we rumbled on a little bit like that for a while, but then COVID was, if you like, the galvanizing point, in that technology got live sport through the pandemic. And that was a bit of a game changer for us, because all our PR clients dried up within 3 months of lockdown being announced, quite naturally. And we thought, well, thank goodness we've got our own IP that we can really focus on. And we went all out on the sports tech side of the business, and it blossomed. So, I mean, if you'd asked me 6, 7, 8 months into the pandemic how the business was, I would have probably just wept, because it was like, my God, I've lost the PR. Is the sports tech gamble really going to pay off? And it did. And it's been fascinating. And I can't believe it was 10 years last cycle that we've been doing sports tech. But it's been so interesting to watch. I've learned so much, even, obviously from a business point of view, but just seeing technology evolve from the sidelines has been uniquely informative.
I've got to come back to that and ask a bit more, dive in a little bit more about the sports tech specifically. But I'm just curious in terms of ENS, when you launched that one, and I know you're saying about that boutique nature of it, and I can imagine it would be super frustrating, right? You built a business specifically around sport, and then everyone, like you said, coming in and saying they could do it because they've got the larger kind of agency name and snapping up some of those big contracts. But is there anything that stands out between of the work you've done there? Any projects or campaigns or any people you worked with back then that kind of highlights for you?
Yeah. highlights and also things that kind of shape your thinking going forward. I mean, one of the joys to work on, because I'm Welsh, I'm a rugby nut. We picked up the Brains PR, the guys who were
The Welsh
sponsoring
team, yeah.
the Welsh rugby jerseys. And do you remember Brawn and Brawn again?
Yeah, I remember that one.
When they played France, they couldn't have alcohol sponsorship. We were involved in that, and that was a lot of fun. Um, and because of the work that we did for them on sport, we ended up getting their whole sports portfolio. But also, we ended up picking up a lot of non-sport work. So when the smoking ban came in, we found ourselves doing that. And yeah, that was fascinating, having a broader brief, but it was very reassuring that we did good work and were respected by the client, just the way we kept winning more and more work from them. So that can boost your confidence as a young small business. I think the other thing is we found ourselves doing more and more and more in crisis management, and became very specialist at it. And it reached a point where there wasn't actually a single thing in crisis that we hadn't covered. And with certain things, that there's an energy to it, but I have to say, some of the things that you end up dealing with, I wasn't sorry to leave behind.
That
You
was going to be
suddenly
a
start
question, yeah.
thinking when you,
No, I was intrigued about that because obviously
yeah,
you've got the correct. You'd feel like it's, I guess, super exciting. Adrenaline's going. You got to get something sorted out quickly when you're brought into that situation. But then, are you saying that the subject matter
yeah,
of what you're having to deal with was what was kind of maybe not so exciting?
yeah. I mean that we um we had to deal with something very personal and tragic for one of our clients, and there was no upside to that. It was joyless. We really liked the person involved. It was absolutely beyond sad what had happened. Um, and then when you're sort of putting the phone down on journalists, just saying there's no story here. That's the kind of thing I just thought, you know what, I think I've reached the road, at the end of the road on this, and that it really helped me decide the direction the company went in. Um, you know, there's nothing better than when you're doing something celebratory, um, you whoever you're working with, and success breeds happiness and positivity, and is very collegiate and galvanizing. Dealing with something that's objectively sad, there's no upside to it. And it's, that's been one of the interesting things with social media. And whenever I look at a lot of posts now when people express sympathy, it's a bit like, actually, there's a side of this that's just perpetuating the story. Um, you know, that's actually, that can be very, very painful for the family reading it.
Nowadays, right? So you're running the STA Group, and the PR element, like you said, is it still exists slightly or not? Is you still delivering and to running that? Is that no? There's no PR. It's just purely all in, 100% in. Right, perfect. So just in terms of I guess the first awards to now, I always like to see that kind of distance traveled, that kind of decade of awards. In terms of scale, what was your kind of the first sports tech awards? What did that look like? And um, I guess attendance. How many awards did you have? Was it, yeah.
Well, oh God, how many? We had about 14 or 15 awards. It was lunch for 400 at the brewery. Um, I mean, again, I shamelessly tapped up mates to be judges and presenters and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it's incredible to think just last May we were in New York and we had messages from people like Harry Kane and Brian Habana and a whole Podrick Harrington. They all sent video messages, and Peter Phillips. He's been tremendously supportive. So yeah, it's it was on Park Avenue, and it's just like, wow, this is interesting. And again, with some of the winners, year one, it was very international, and we did have, some of the big names like the NBA. But it was probably so many names of businesses that are commonplace to us now, but back then they were relative startups. Whereas, in New York, we had the likes of people like Apple walking up to pick up trophies. So it's we won't in 10 years we've come far.
I was gonna ask about the kind of the trends of what you're seeing in the industry, but those because you mentioned the kind of those startups back then. Is there any? What would you say is like the biggest success story that maybe you've highlighted at your awards, but they've gone on to kind of wider acclaim and from a kind of a startup point of view?
Well, it almost seems mean to pick out some, because there have been half a dozen that have gone on to have huge valuations. I mean, in some respects, it's almost not just who have been the biggest, because there are a lot. But one of the facts that we established for ourselves not so long ago was actually the success by volume. And by that I mean of all the brands that have been shortlisted, and including our winners, but all the brands that have been shortlisted for the awards, and bearing in mind we have a lot of startups in there, fewer than 3% have failed. So 97% have gone on to be successful, and it's just like,
it's almost like that stamp of approval,
we
right?
should invest in some of them, frankly.
Maybe that's what you should do. Yeah, give them an investment as well.
Oh yeah.
To be able to build that brand that's almost like like I said, the stamp of approval for a sports tech product or project that's a validation, right there.
But we can't. It's the process that is so telling. In that. The way the judges, I mean, we are so exacting. I mean, I'm so grateful that people are prepared to fill in the forms, because we ask a lot. And when you've seen a lot, I mean, I've learned so much from the investors and some of the very, very successful business people who've sat on various judging panels for us. Obviously we look very closely at what they've said, and when we've had live pitches, we've listened in, that we now know what to look for. But I don't have anything to do with the judging. None of my team does. It all goes out to our judges. They all judge online, because we've all sat in rooms where we have been judges, and I go out and I judge a lot of other awards. I just don't judge my own. But we've all been in rooms where there's been a debate, and we've all ended up thinking, do you know what? This person wants that brand to win. We've been here arguing it for 3 hours. They can have it. I need to go and pick the kids up from school, or go out for dinner, or whatever it is. And so I was always very keen not to have the loudest shouter get the biggest sway, because I think that's not good. It's not fair. And so everything is done online. We get over 50 judges involved. Judges judge what's within their realm of expertise. They don't judge anybody that's a competitor or where they've got a vested interest. They all sign non-disclosure agreements. So the information people share with us is protected. So all those kind of things that are right and proper practice, we do. And it's a straightforward point system. And it was really interesting, actually, after the second cycle in COVID, the standards of entries just got so high. I don't think we'd had a single tied entry before that year. And that year we had 6 categories were tied. And we just kept going back to the judges and back to the judges and back to different judges. And for the first time ever, we ended up, the judges could not decide between two brands. And so we had to give out two trophies. But that's the standard that they're achieving. And it is, I mean, mind-blowing, jaw-dropping. These are overused phrases. But seriously, when we see some of the things that come in, it's just like, this isn't just the cutting edge, it's the bleeding edge of the cutting edge. And, who knew that stuff like this was even possible? Yeah, it's conceptually possible to measure bravery now.
Yeah, I like that. I was thinking that you mentioned the application process. It's almost like if you're taking that, and I haven't seen the application forms. Maybe soon we'll put one in. It's almost like they're maybe going through like a mini due diligence process that maybe makes them, the things you're talking about, maybe makes them going through that and being successful, probably ready for investment if they haven't already got it, or going to go for the next round because they've kind of gone through that process of divulging everything and you're checking it across all the judges.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's too much I can teach the likes of Apple.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Or maybe if they're raising, I don't know if they're raising any funds or.
Yeah. Or frankly, the NBA, I think they've done perfectly well without me so far, much to my disappointment, but probably not theirs. But yeah, a lot of the younger businesses who've submitted entries have said it was so instructive because, yes, it just made them think a lot more commercially about their business and what it looked like from people looking in, as opposed to them just thinking about their business. And to be honest, that's one of the things we try and unpick with the entry form, because what we do find, and anybody listening to this, please take it as a big hint. A lot of people in the space tend to default to describing themselves a bit hyperbolically, in that we are a dynamic solution to fan engagement. Well, what does that tell anyone? What exactly do you do? Get to the guts of what you do. And I think people like strap lines and pat phrases and things that sound smart, but often by sounding smart, they miss the guts of what they're trying to communicate. And so again, that's part of the entry form process, is to unpick exactly what people do, because our judges are, in some instances, unashamedly not technical, but the sports sector purchasers aren't always, we don't all walk around with degrees in astrophysics. We need to use tech without necessarily understanding the technology behind it. And that's so important, is that you could have built something amazing, but if Coach A in Team X can't grasp how to use it, you're never going to shift product.
No, it was like you said about, Apple's the prime example, right? They make products you use, pick up and use, and elegant, but under the hood, they're probably some of the most complex there is.
I would like to have to try and make one.
Oh yeah, no. Speaking about that, can you talk about the cutting edge, bleeding edge? And I know you've got NDA for the kind of the applications and things like that. But is there anything you can share in terms of some of those projects or products that are out there, or that you kind of mind blowing that some of our listeners would really be interested in?
Oh, I mean, to be honest, my mind gets blown daily by some of the stuff that we see, and there are things that we see very early on that we know are going to rumble on in the background and will explode. As I said, when I read up about bravery being detected, it was just like, you are kidding me. And I think they reached a certain point and there's some more to be done. And it's interpretation of bravery rather than, I know just how brave you are. Clearly that's impossible. But some of the facial recognition stuff that's being done, so that you can tell through somebody's demeanor how up they are to compete. And do they then need to go and see the sports psych, or actually Do they need maybe to come onto a match later, or what can the backroom team do to make them even more competition ready? I mean, God, just and look at what is being done to running times thanks to high tech shoes at the moment. It's crazy. So that, I mean, I could talk about a whole range of different things, probably for more time than we've got allocated.
Well, the biggest one for me at the moment, obviously, we're in this inflection point now where, with AI being as useful as it is now, obviously it's been in the background. You've probably seen it a lot in terms of machine learning and all the data side. That I'm sure you've had projects and winners come through over the years. But now, as it's kind of coming to the those tools being brought to the mainstream that anyone can kind of grab hold of and use to a certain extent.
Yeah, and do.
Yeah,
I mean, who writes a press release from scratch these days when you can use chatbot GPT?
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. What are you seeing there on the sports side? I mean, in terms of, or how do you, from your vantage point of seeing things happening and how they come through, what do you think is going to be the impact? Or just a guessing game, I guess, at this stage. But how do you think that's going to impact the industry?
Oh, do you know what? That is such a big question because there are so many different parts where AI is applicable. And it's interesting because you read so much nervousness and fearing of it, and there's been a lot of hype and a lot of scaring about that. And I think there are steps that companies should be taking to protect their information. I mean, anybody who doesn't have a company policy telling their staff, do not put company information into any of these AI bots, because it's going to be regurgitated as facts to anybody who decides to do a bit of searching on it, probably in a matter of weeks' time. That, on the one hand, that's a concern, but equally, we need to legislate our business and have protocols within our business to protect ourselves. So I can see why that causes nervousness. When I see what's happening about people not having to ever draft PowerPoints again, AI can do that. I am 100% on side. So things like that, I'm a big fan. Where I see AI in sports specifically, when you look at coaching, I think it is hugely exciting there. I've seen some technologies that, because we all know that we default to our comfort zones with things and we ask the questions that we understand and we are comfortable with the answers. And there are some coaching products out there now that are AI orientated, so that will challenge coaches, should they choose to be challenged, not to answer the questions that they always ask, but to prompt coaches to ask the questions they should be asking. So, I mean, we all know the key pivot points in certain sports, and those are the ones that most coaches will automatically look to get answers around. But actually, there are all sorts of other key decision-making times within the game that AI data can prompt you to ask. I think that's really exciting. Without giving the game away, because we've actually got, if I can do a quick plug, our sports technology annual review is going to be coming out in a few weeks. In that, we do a lot of forecasting, looking back at what we've learnt and sharing some key trends that should influence strategies for people over the next year to 18 months. One of the chapters that's been written in there by our friends at HOK, who are stadium and arena architects, very smart folk. They've done a whole piece on AI and authenticity, because if you think now about deep fakes, I could put the two of us somewhere, wherever we want to be, on top of the pyramids at Giza, at the Super Bowl, whatever, to such a realistic degree. Who's to say we weren't there?
Yeah, it's true. I've seen something on that one around. I don't know if you've seen that. I'm not sure who's doing it. Someone's doing it's like almost like a key, right? So then you have your own personal. If athletes or celebrities or whatever, they have their own key, which like authenticates the image. So if
Yeah,
I've partnered with um, Pepsi, Nike, whatever it is, to say they have my key, so they can publish images, so they could create that, but I've already
yeah,
pre-authorized them to do that kind of thing, and there's a exchange of
yeah.
consent, if you like. But yeah, it's a bit of a minefield, I think, if you just think about the implication.
Well, it is because I mean, it's harmless. You and I pretending to be at the Super Bowl to an extent, but I mean, when you think about particularly this kind of millennial Gen Z, the degree to which they value authenticity, and AI potentially blows that up. There's a very interesting dynamic at play there.
No, definitely, definitely. So, I mean, likewise, previously, you could talk AI and kind of new projects for hours, but just switching gears slightly, in terms of you building a business and being successful in kind of effectively sitting right in the middle of the industry, so you've got to have a lot of data points, a lot of kind of inbound things coming to you. In terms of building that kind of trust and that trusted brand, where I'm sure there has been competitor awards springing up over the years or whatever, but in terms of bringing that, being that kind of trusted, yeah, in terms of that trusted. So, what is it that you speaking to business owners? What is it that you focus on to kind of build your brand and kind of position it in the industry or in the market?
I think the first thing is we have left huge amounts of money on the table by always saying if you sponsor, you can't enter, if you enter, you can't sponsor. And we've even had to end one sponsor relationship cordially, but it was the right thing to do because they wanted to enter and they were partnering us. And so we just said, well, can't do both. We'd rather have you, we'd love to have you in on all fronts, but that's not what we do. So I think because everybody has always recognized that these awards can't be bought. The process by which the winners are determined or the shortlist is determined is very fair. The winners absolutely, top notches, gets the silverware. So I think from that point of view, there's a lot of integrity. And we've worked hard to give people value. We don't. Our awards are not crazily priced by industry standards. We give people added value. They can be part of our directory. We really celebrate the shortlist. We've got a news service. We share people's news, whether they're on the shortlist or not. If they're in our network, we try and create that whole community as well. We try and be very respectful of the fact that people give us their time. They invest money with us. We need to provide them with a product that seriously moves the needle with them from a business point of view, whether it is enabling them to celebrate the work of their colleagues and doing it as an internal comms thing, whether they're using it to create those client conversations quicker and more cost effectively. Whatever it is, our starting point is always, well, what would success look like for you? And it's the same with our sponsor partners. We won't partner with people if we don't think we can deliver what it is they need. As I said, it's what does success look like for you? Give it to us numerically. And if we can't do what you want us to numerically, then let's walk away as friends. But what we won't do is ram raid people's budgets and try and do deals based on the fact that, well, that's 1, 2, 3 years of money, but they'll never want to do business with us again. Hopefully, everybody we've ever partnered with will walk away and said, no, they were people of integrity with whom to do business.
Talk about that added value piece as well. Obviously, you mentioned the report coming out, and and obviously you've got a podcast as well. Is that those two things kind of linked, like that kind of that network and that community angle as well? I guess that feeds through.
We try to. The issue is we're a small team and we work hard. But yeah, the whole idea is, and it's been fascinating because we've just done quite a big data piece for ourselves, and actually had a quite a granular look at our geographical reach, the seniority of our network, and it's all been it's made for very exciting reading. And in some respects, where we're winning is getting that engagement with senior people who want to be informed, as well as entrepreneurs and visionaries who are starting up sports tech businesses, because it's a fascinating landscape that is a real mix of incredibly young but visionary and driven people who become very senior very quickly, as well as the kind of hierarchy, senior bodies in traditional brands and organisations that you and I would think of immediately if somebody said, "Oh, the sports industry."
I'm just curious, as you mentioned it there, in terms of your geographical kind of what it looks like, the pattern, where are your it's probably evenly spread, but do you see anywhere that's like maybe not for a listener or for yourself, maybe but surprised that we're big in wherever, or this is really engaging in this area, in this country that I never thought would be. Yeah, I'm big in Japan or something. Do you know, like that type of thing where it's something that you might not. Yeah.
Well, it was really strange. We had, in fact, I think it may even be on our deck. We did our Google Analytics map, and the only place we didn't have any reach through that was Greenland. So we could do better there. And I think we'd even had a look up from Burkina Faso or something. But you never know the degree to which VPNs play a role in that. But taking a look at people who've downloaded us and the data that we've got on our database, and the database is now really good. It's, I mean, as you would imagine, huge in North America, huge in the UK, mainland Europe, Israel, Australia and New Zealand. And then the sort of second layer is more around the Middle East, South Africa and China. So, and then there's the other level, but I mean, there aren't that many countries that we don't have some kind of traction.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you're building that data as well over time, it gets more richer. You start seeing those trends and probably predict. Oh well, we can deploy the AI on it and it'll predict what's going to happen in the future, I guess. So yeah.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that. We're working on something retrospectively, just looking at all the entries we've ever had at the moment and doing some modelling around that to see how the industry has changed. Because you pick up words like, when we started, everything was about wearables, then it was about participation, then big data, and you just get these kind of words that then start populating people's entry forms. And about 5 years ago, it's like, if I see the expression big data again, geez guys, when is it just going to be data?
Just a couple more questions for me, and switching gears a little bit. For yourself, obviously running the business, we always ask all of our kind of leaders and entrepreneurs on the show, if you have any kind of specific routines that you do, things that I always have to have, either my daily routine or my kind of habits that keep me working at my best, working at kind of peak performance. Do you have anything that you kind of lean on for that?
You mean I do a kind of daily workout and walk. I always make sure I get those in where I can. I always start my day with Wordle and Wordle. But if them combined takes more than 5 minutes, I fail. But that's with a cup of tea and a handful of vitamins. Right. Yeah. So I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah, so if it doesn't go right, Wordle doesn't go well, then might be a bad day. I was expecting you to have some.
Wordle always goes.
I was wondering if you'd have some some secret sports tech or secret tech you're using that we don't know about yet. But
Oh, I see.
no, your
Right.
answer's perfectly great. That's what I was looking for. But I was just wondering if you had anything else.
Oh, like my wearables or
Then if you had,
things. Yeah, well, probably not as many as I should, but I think I see so many and learn so much. And there's almost that thing. When I was doing PR, we looked after a lot of players. And so as a result, I ended up not supporting any specific clubs because it just felt too disloyal, particularly with some of them who kept changing. And it was like, so I think when it comes to sports tech, I try and adopt the same agnostic stance just because I can't be caught showing favoritism. I think that would probably undo a decade's worth of impartiality.
That makes sense. Just the last one, we always ask everyone this kind of reflective question. If you were gonna go back to when you started out in your career, and you could give yourself one piece of advice to take with you, if you went back and spoke to your younger self, what would that be?
I've had this thing said to me, and I'm not sure even now if I pay any attention to it, but it is good advice, which is don't try and boil the ocean. Pick one thing and do it well. And I think that's good advice. I think probably, and it is actually advice I've handed out and I've tried to follow, not always as well as I should, but I just think it's think of building the network. And I mean, I met a rugby player who had kept, I mean, this will date it because I don't even know if business cards are still a thing, but from the day he had started in the academy to right the way through until he ran his testimonial, he was able to produce a business card for every single person who he had kept every business card and had kept in touch with every single person on that who'd given him a business card. And I thought, damn, that's impressive.
Yeah, I bet you must have sold a lot of tickets to his testimonial then as well when it came around to it.
I think his testimonial went very, very well, actually. But I think the flip side of that is what I don't think you can or should do is just collect people to use them. I think you've got to go through life with some degree of honor and integrity. And I think it is that thing that it's what we're trying to do. It's if you can engage with people and keep them engaged and respect the fact that they may not be interested. But there are so many people I thought, damn, I wish I was still in touch with them. And not necessarily for any commercial gain or just because they were a good person. But bandwidth has meant that they've fallen by the wayside. But that said, our printer from 25 years ago, I haven't spoken to in 6 years, and we had a phone call this afternoon. So, if those good relationships are there, you can just pick things up if the right foundation was laid. So keep laying good foundations.
I love that one. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you so much for your time and being so transparent with us. It's going to be, look forward to getting the show out.
No, honestly, it was an honour to be asked on, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope I've done your time proud, James.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And we'll link all those all the links through to the awards and to the review and the podcast and everything. So anyone wants to follow up, we'll get them over there. And good luck with next year's awards. I'm sure you're already planning those.
Well, thank you, and good luck to you. I think what you're doing is great.
Oh, thank you so much.